Have you ever spent your hard-earned money buying a booster box, then not pull the one card you actually needed to build a deck? Yeah, we've all been there, and with more players, collectors, and investors buying up stock the second it hits the shelf, getting packs is harder than ever. That's why picking up singles is the smart way to go, letting you actually play the game instead of running around town gambling on booster packs. Don't get me wrong, cracking packs is fun, but if you want to get into the competitive scene without completely draining your wallet, well, you've come to the right place. With every release, I break down the cards you should be actually picking up from the set to help you avoid unnecessary spending by focusing on what fits in your budget and playstyle. To make things easy, we're sorting the set into a few key categories. The must-have staples, these are the cards every player should own. New decks and deck upgrades, I feel like that one's pretty self-explanatory. Tech cards, these are situational but game-changing cards when used in the right deck, and you typically only need one copy of these for your collection, allowing you to adapt decks as needed. And then there's the cards with potential. These are sleeper picks that could blow up later as more cards release, or be on the more rogue side of things. Also, for those that like alternate formats like Gym Leader Challenge and Budget Build Battles, don't worry, I got you covered with those as well. So whether you're hunting for singles at your local shop, searching online, or maybe you are just cracking packs and want to know what you should be watching out for, well, let's take this journey together through this buy list breakdown. Now we're going to kick things off with the staples first, which surprisingly, well, there's actually none in this set that I'd say everybody needs. There's a lot of good cards in the set, there's a lot of really interesting new decks coming out of the set, but there isn't just like outright cards that it's like, hey, you can just splash this into any deck. For new decks though, there is, well, quite a handful as trainer Pokemon are coming out. Also, apologies guys, I'm trying to do this in one take, so if you see me stuttering or anything, I'm gonna do my best to just power through. But yeah, we're kicking off with Hop's Zacian EX. It's got the attack Close Cleaver, doing 30 base damage for one colorless energy. It's pretty solid, and 30 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So a bit of chip damage to the active, bit of chip damage to the bench. Can be good to set up numbers, and just one energy, it's easy enough to get the attack off. The second attack on there doing 240 damage for 3 steel and a colorless, called Brave Slash, kind of a callback to Zacian V. It had Brave Blade, this has Brave Slash, 3 steel energy, it's still in there. There is that colorless energy that's in there, but you can actually ignore that with a tool card that Hop's going to be bringing with him and making this card even stronger. So that 240 and 30 is actually going to get bumped up to 60, thanks to, just bear with me 1 second here, Hop's Choice Band. It's going to reduce the attack cost of all of Hop's Pokemon by 1 colorless energy and increase the damage output by 30. So you can do 60 to the active, 30 to the bench, and 270 with the second attack to them. You can pump that number even further with Postwick. It's a stadium that Hop's going to be able to use, increasing all of his Pokemon's damage by 30. So yeah, 30 on 30, you're getting extra 60 in there all up, and another 30 with his Snorlax. So Big Billy makes it so all of Hop's Pokemon do 30 more damage. So 333. We used to have a Hop card that was draw 3, and now he's just like, no, I want 3 cards that boost my damage by 3 damage counters, basically. So he's keeping that consistent at least, but has gone from just a draw 3 rival card to a pretty intimidating trainer. So yeah, congrats on that, Hop. That's not the only Pokemon he's bringing though, it's more than just the Snorlax and the Zacian. He does have a Cramorant that's also pretty solid, 1 colorless energy, so you can be removing that attack cost with the Choice Band and pumping up the damage by another 90, getting you up to 210 to take out basic EX Pokemon with ease. You can only use this attack if your opponent has exactly 3 or 4 prize cards remaining though, so if they're on 5, 6, or 1 or 2, the Cramorant's doing nothing. This is kind of like your mid-game attacker, so after Zacian gets knocked out, go into Cramorant, pop them. After Cramorant gets knocked out, go into another Cramorant theoretically, and then go back into Zacians after that. So it's a good way to skew the prize trade and just get an attacker online for, well, effectively free if you have a Choice Band on there. Now, Hop's not the only like new deck coming out of this set. Iono is also bringing her trainer Pokemon with them. Bellybolt EX kind of being like the headliner of them. It's got the ability Electro Streamer. As often as you like during your turn, you can attach a basic lightning energy from your hand to one of your Iono Pokemon in play. Bellybolt being one of Iono's Pokemon, you can just pay its own attack cost, doing 230. You can't attack with it the following turn though, so you need to be able to bounce it around. Also with the Zacian, I think I left that out. Brave Slash, you have to bounce it around as well. Similar to the Zacian V, Bellybolt having that same effect. But since you can just accelerate energy onto this, you could just be paying your own retreat cost to just hard retreat this back into the bench, into another Bellybolt. It's not too bad. You can go into another attacker that Iono has, being Iono's Voltorb. Its attack Chain Bolt starts at 20 base damage, then scales up by 20 for each lightning energy attached to your Iono Pokemon in play, so Bellybolt just floods the board with energy, Voltorb just gets stronger and it gives you a single prize attacking option. So if you run into EX walls like Mimikyu or Sylveon or the upcoming Crustle that just recently got revealed, Voltorb is kind of your way to just shred through them. Also noticing this sign just turned off. There we go. I really need to get that thing replaced, but it is what it is. Iono does have more than just attackers and energy acceleration though. She also has an inbuilt draw engine with her Kilowattrel. Its ability Flash Draw lets you discard a lightning energy that's attached to this Pokemon and then draw until you have 6 cards in hand. The Belly Bolt can be attaching the lightning energy to trigger this effect and without using your attachment for turn, so it's not too bad. And it doesn't say you can only use 1 Kilowattrel each turn, so you can just have a board full of Kilowattrels, like 2 or 3 of these, and just draw through your deck very, very efficiently. These cards obviously being a solid deck in and of themselves, like Iono, you can probably just build a deck around her, but it would also pair really nicely with another Pokemon, which we'll get to once we get to the deck upgrades. With this though, discarding the lightning energy can get a little bit tricky, right? You want those energy to be able to attack with Belly Bolt, and you can get them back with the Stadium Iono's bringing being Levencia. Once during each player's turn, they can put 2 basic lightning energy cards from their discard pile back into their hand. So Kilowattrel's ditching those energy, you can trigger 2 Kilowattrels and then just get that energy back, or you can be attaching energy to Belly Bolt. You attack, you can't attack the following turn, you hard retreat it, you discard 2 energy, then you just get them back from the discard pile with Levencia and set up another Belly Bolt. So yeah, it seems like a pretty nice, say, closed circuit, because they're lightning Pokemon. And the other trainer that is bringing a very interesting new deck to the format is N, and he's got Zoroark. So it has the ability, also apologies guys, this thing does not want to stay on today. I think it's just like the soldering of it. I poke it or I give it a flick and it switches back on, but I'm not an electrician. And Zoroark, though, having the ability Trade, which is a callback to Zoroark GX, who had literally the same ability. You're going to discard a card from your hand and draw 2 cards. It's a great way to give you draw power. It's also a great way to get cards in the discard pile that you might want there, which pairs really nicely with an item card we'll get to in just a moment. The attack here, though, Night Joker, costs 2 dark energy, then lets you choose one of your benched Ends Pokemon and copy it as this attack. So it's kind of like a new toolbox deck that we're getting. Regidrago V-Star is on the way out. People really like toolbox decks. Zoroark kind of just comes in immediately after Drago goes out and replaces him. So we'll get into the attackers that it can use in just a moment, but to pay for that attack cost is a little bit awkward. 2 dark energy. Dark Patch is going to be rotating, same as Regidrago V-Star. So we kind of need a replacement for it. And N gets one with I'm not going to read that card's name. I can't take it seriously. Ends Power Up, we'll call it. You get to attach 1 basic energy from your discard pile to one of your benched Ends Pokemon. So it's basically Dark Patch for the Zoroark. You're using Trade, you're discarding a dark energy, you're using this Power Up, you're getting that dark energy back and onto the bench, manually attaching another one or using another one of these items to just get a second one on there and then get it into the active and start attacking. So it's pretty solid. To be able to pivot from the active into the bench, it would be nice if we had a way to remove retreat costs, which we do because apparently N has a castle. So each N Pokemon in play, yours and the opponent, has no retreat costs. So we can easily be using that item card to get energy onto the bench, then pivot out another N Pokemon from the active with the Zoroark that's now fully charged up. Then the Zoroark can start using all of these really interesting attacks, like Ends Darmanitan. It's got the attack Backdraft, does a multiplier of 30 for each energy card in your opponent's discard pile. Ceruledge EX, as a prime example, really likes discarding energy to make itself stronger. Goldengo really likes discarding energy to land big attacks. Ends Darmanitan sees that and goes, cool, I'm just going to delete you. Especially into Goldengo. Into Goldengo, you probably just attack with Ends Darmanitan, because unlike Regidrago, which wanted the attackers in the discard pile to use the attacks, it wants them on your bench. So if you're able to use Darmanitan's attack with Zoroark, you're able to use Darmanitan's attack with Darmanitan. So it's like, hell yeah, you hit Goldengo, you just sacked a couple energy. I'm just going to use the power up onto this, attach for turn, pivot into the active, backdraft. Great. It's a solid single prize attacker to skew the prize trade, and also just a great attack to be able to get access to. That's not even the main attack on it though, as Blaze Ball Cannon is going to do 90 base damage to the active, and then it's also going to do 90 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. You do have to discard all energy to use this attack, but it's basically just Radiant Greninja's attack, but being kept in rotation. Greninja's on the way out, and it's like, hey, here's some bench snipe for you. You don't get to pick both targets. You're going to be hitting the active and one thing on the bench. So Greninja was able to go like, oh, there's 2 pre-evolutions, take them both out. You'd have to gust that up into the active to hit it and hit another one on the bench, but really solid effect, especially since bench protection's kind of on the way out with rotation. Manaphy's rotating. We do still have Rabskin rotation, but your opponent's going to be trying to set up a stage 1 to potentially block this. They're giving up 2 deck space to potentially get it set up and hope they haven't prized one of those pieces. No one's going to be running Rabska. The set after Journey Together, we are getting Shaman, which is effectively Manaphy getting a reprint. It only protects non-rule box Pokemon though, so it's there to protect the pre-evolutions pretty much. But when that comes out, it's also got 80 HP. They're not going to be able to get it out with Buddy Buddy Poffin. Darmanitan's going to be able to have a field day for the most part. Also keep in mind though, bench damage doesn't apply to Terra Pokemon. They literally just say they ignore it. So when you're using this attack, if you're trying to set up numbers, don't try and set up numbers into a Terra Pokemon. Take them out before they get a chance to evolve. That's not the only attacker that Zoroark can be capitalizing off of though. There is also a Reshiram he's going to be bringing along with him, having Powerful Rage. Does a multiplier of 20 for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So Zoroark, he's got a decent chunk of HP on him. If he tanks a hit, you can just retaliate back into them with Powerful Rage. It's nice. It's like, oh, they're trying to go for a 2-hit KO into you. Well, did they hit you hard enough that you can just reflect that damage back at them? It's like, oh, they did 150 or 160 to me, let's say. 320 back to you. Or Dragapult does 200 into you and it's trying to set up damage counters on the bench. It's like, oh, buddy, that's coming back at you as 400. So yeah, mistakes may be made. And in addition to all these trainer Pokemon that are basically just inbuilt archetypes for themselves, like out of this set, they're coming with all these cards, they're ready to go. It's sort of like when we had the Battle Styles cards, right? We had Single Strike, Rapid Strike, Fusion Strike. A set came out, it pretty much had decks ready to go right out of it. That's what these are. There is other Pokemon with potential in this set though. There's pretty much only one though that I'd say on a competitive level, and that's going to be Mamoswine EX. This might be a bit of a hot take, and if you disagree with me, let me know in the comments down below, but honestly, I think this card seems solid. It's got the ability Mammoth Carry. Once during your turn, you can search your deck for a Pokemon and just put it into your hand. So you're able to consistently set up the rest of your board and get into key pieces. You pair this with something like a Pidgeot EX that can just search your deck for any card. So it's like you have Mamoswine, it gets you another Pokemon. You have Pidgeot, it gets you another rare candy. You're getting another Mamoswine online. Or you're getting something online to accelerate energy out for Mamoswine's attack. The attack costing 2 fighting energy, you can be paying that with, there's a new Blaziken EX in the set that could be very helpful, or you could even be using something like Garganical to get that energy out onto it. It's going to do 180 base damage, then 40 more damage for each stage 2 Pokemon on your bench. So if you have 5, just a standard bench size, right? That's an extra 200. So that's getting up to 380. You're taking out anything in the format. Like they're going down. Mamoswine's got the most HP in the format, I think, at 340. In a mirror match, you're taking down another Mamoswine. Even if you don't quite have a full bench, like you're down one guy, so 4 things on your bench, 160, that's still getting you up to 340. Yeah. Go math skills, yeah. 380 minus 40, yep. So yeah, even without a full bench, you can take down most things in the format. If you do want to push those numbers up, you could chuck a Terra Pokemon on your bench, run this with Area 0 Underdepths. There's not really any need to, but you technically can do that if you want to get up even higher, because that would be 8 times 4 is 320 plus 180. You're doing 500 damage. That's a little ridiculous. I'm not sure how you're going to set up that many stage 2s. You'd have to be running a lot of manual evolutions, and you're capped at 4 rare candies, but you can technically do that. Also, Grand Tree could work really well with this as your A spec to just be able to like, hey, I've got a Piloswine or whatever. What's the pre-evolution on this? Mamoswine, Piloswine. Oh, that's going to bug me. The little mole fella. He's on your bench. Grand Tree, instantly up to a Mamoswine, or a Pidgey on your bench, instantly up to a Pidgeot. Like, you can get things going really, really quickly. That's pretty much it for what I would say are the new decks coming out of this set, though. So if you want the full list of them, these are the cards you'd be looking for. I did forget to mention a couple of the Hops cards on there. I believe he's also got a item card, Hops Bag, that you discard a card from your hand, search your deck for 2 basic Pokemon, put them onto the bench. Actually, is it even that? I don't even think it is that. I think it's just straight up search your deck for 2 Hops Pokemon. Give me 2 seconds. Yeah, it's literally just get them from your deck. So it's Buddy Poffin, but just for Hops Pokemon, not capped at HP. So like they don't have to have less than 70 HP. Like you want to get 2 Zacians, get 2 Zacians. You want to get 2 Snorlax, get 2 Snorlax. Snorlax's effect doesn't stack though, so like it's not really a reason to do that one, but you technically could. Next, we're going to be getting into the deck upgrades for you guys. And honestly, there's a few, but there's not too many. So the first card I want to talk about is Lily's Clefairy EX. I think this is going to be great for Gardevoir. It's got the ability Fairy Zone. The weakness of each of your opponent's Dragon Pokemon is Psychic. So it's basically like they're reintroducing Fairy Pokemon back into the format, but only if you have Clefairy in play, and then Psychic Pokemon are just Fairy types. So Gardevoir, it's kind of reliant on having a bunch of single prize attackers. It helps skew the prize trade. It rushes out energy. Clefairy, you can technically make into a single prize Pokemon with Lily's Pearl. When this is attached to one of Lily's Pokemon and it gets knocked out, they give up 1 less prize. So Clefairy can effectively just be a single prize Pokemon. It's got 190 HP, so it's not the biggest 2-prizer. It's good that we can remove one of those prizes for it. And the attack on their Full Moon Rondo is, it's basically like the Johto beasts that had their Vs. So Raikou, Entei, Suicune all had Rondo attacks. Blizzard Rondo, something Rondo. Apologies, guys. I'm pulling these off the top of my head. You sometimes forget words. But yeah, they all had the Rondo attacks, which did a base damage of 20, then 20 more damage for each bench Pokemon, yours and the opponent's. So with Gardevoir, you fill out the bench, yours capped at 5, that's an extra 100, you're doing 120. The opponent fills out theirs, another 100 on top of that, 220 for 2 energy. It's not too bad, especially if you make this into a single prize Pokemon. If Area 0 Underdepth's in play for your opponent, you can scale that up even further. And if you're using this into like Dragapult, that's value. You just delete that. You don't have to worry about Regidrago V-Star anymore. 1, because Budew killed it. 2, because Rotation's about to completely remove it from the face of the earth. But yeah, really interesting card for that. The other deck upgrade, it is for Raging Bolt EX. The Iono Pokemon, we already talked about them, but yeah, I think they'd work really well for Raging Bolt. Obviously, Belly Bolt being able to just flood your board with lightning energy. Raging Bolt can then just discard those for its attack cost. Kilowattrel giving you some solid draw power off that, and Lavencia just to recycle that energy. Do also have Volcanion EX on here, just as a one-off copy. I think it could be interesting, especially for Terrapagos played with like the Poison package currently. So it's currently running around with like Petrant for just like cheeky early game donks without even having to attack anything. Rotation will be removing a Radiant Sneasler from that deck, which was a way to boost up the poison damage output by 20. Volcanion EX, when it's in the active spot, you can burn your opponent's Pokemon, which does 20 damage between turns. It does have to be in the active, and it does have a bit of a hefty retreat cost, but you're losing Sneasler from that deck, so there's a bench space that's open, and you already have a Latias EX in there, making it so your Pokemon have free retreat. So it's just Volcanion in the active, burn them, free retreat, back into the something off the bench, like a Terrapagos or something, to modify its damage out, and we're good. Or even go into Petrant, and it's just like, hey, between turns you take a bunch of extra poison damage, and then also that burn damage. So I think it's definitely an interesting card to experiment with. Now, for the cards that we're going to talk about next, it's going to be the ones that are worth having. And I'm just going to buy a little bit of time here, I'll be completely honest, while I switch the card you guys are going to see. Trying to do this without needing any editing. So the cards that are worth having as techs, first one is going to be Zoroark. We did already talk about it, but even just for that ability trade, you can easily splash this into a number of decks just as a draw engine for them. It's basically Kirlia, but it has extra health, or Liepard if you'd prefer to think about it that way. So those cards are very solid and can get slotted into any decks, especially ones that like discarding specific cards, like Ceruledge. They want to discard energy. Hey, Zoroark can help you do that. It can help you dig through your deck, splash it in there. There's going to be other situations where this comes up as well. Technically, you could put it into Gardevoir. That one feels like a weird one to me, but you could even get away with that. You wouldn't be using it as an attacker, though. It's mainly just in there as a draw engine. The Volcanion and the Clefairy we just mentioned for the deck upgrades would also be great techs to have, just one copy of. You can easily splash those into any decks. There's also going to be a new Magearna coming up in this set with the ability Auto Heal. As long as this Pokemon's in the active spot, when you attach an energy card from your hand to one of your Pokemon, you get to heal 90 damage from it. So if you have a deck that is just like doing Rain Dance effects and putting a bunch of energy in play, so like Iono's Belly Bolt as an example, or Baxcalibur, you can be triggering this effect multiple times in a turn. Like if you put 4 energy out, let's say, that's what, 180, 360 you'd be healing. So like something tanks a hit and then it's just like, okay, get Magearna energy active, flood energy onto it, it's fully healed, go back. So a lot of decks currently like running Professor Turo to reset Pokemon. It does mean you have to be able to get energy back onto them or fully evolve them up. Magearna is almost like a way of like, I want the effect of Turo, but I also have a way to get a bunch of energy out. Cool, I can just pivot Magearna into the active and get that same effect, and I don't even need to worry about resetting that Pokemon. I've just fully healed it instead. So it's definitely an interesting one. I'd say have 1 copy for your binder just as a tech. There's also a Dunsparce EX releasing in the set with the attack Adversity Tail. There's a multiplier of 60 for each of your opponent's Pokemon EX in play. Post-rotation, we are losing a lot of solid draw engine Pokemon like Bibarel, like the Curlias, like Lipards. So Dunsparce, there's currently one that it has an ability, you can literally just bounce it back into your deck and straight draw into 3 cards. If your deck is considering running that as a draw engine, having 1 copy of Dunsparce EX just as a secondary attacker isn't a bad idea. 1 energy of any color can be used for this attack, not too bad, and if your opponent floods their board with a bunch of EX Pokemon, you can be doing some pretty solid damage. Like they're dependent on areas you're under depths. It's like, well, I'm just going to delete you because you have potentially 9 EXs in play. They see that you're running this, they're going to be more careful if it goes into a game 2 or a game 3, but for that just burst potential and just that threat of having it, I think it's a great card. Or even just to finish off knockouts, right? Like you don't always have to go into Dunsparce for like a big delete. You can just like, hey, something did chip damage, cool. The Dunsparce is easy enough to set up and I have the other one in here as a draw engine. I have this as a secondary attacker. There's also going to be a solid duel releasing in the set. So we did talk about Hop's deck earlier. I didn't mention this in there just because the builds that I've seen for Zacian haven't really been including this, but this is a card that can be easily splashed into any deck. The ability on here, Challenge Horn, makes it so when you evolve up into duel, it's basically just boss's orders. You're gusting up one of your opponent's bench Pokemon into the active. You go, hey, you, come here. Hey, come here. I want to knock you out. And you do that. You could even run this as like a control type deck too, right? Where it's just like, you have Counter Catcher, you're gusting up things that can't attack. Now you have Duels that can gust up things that can't attack. So if your opponent isn't ahead of you in prizes, you have a way to gust and you're not dependent on like boss's orders or Erika's or things like that. It's just like duel them and then just scoop this up or something. So it'll be an interesting card, I think mostly for the aggressive effects that it can do, because it's, hey, you can get a gust effect with this without being behind on prizes for Counter Catcher or without using your supporter for turn on boss's orders. So like a 1-1 or a 2-2 line in pretty much any deck could bring it to that next level to just be incredibly threatening. Hop's Cramorant also, we did talk about this, but I think this is a good card that even if you're not going to be building Hop's deck, having 1 or 2 Cramorants is just great for mid to late game attackers. Well, like specifically mid game because they need to be on 3 or 4 prizes remaining, but skewing the prize trade for just 1 energy, even just for chip damage, right? Let's talk about a deck like Raging Bolt EX. You only have 2 prize attackers currently. Your opponent just has to go 2-2-2 game. If you go, they get 1 Raging Bolt knocked out and then you go into Cramorant just to do a bit of chip damage and then you don't need to discard as many energy to take another knockout. They knock this out. Now they're playing a 7 prize game instead of a 6 prize game, right? They're not going 2-2-2, they're going 2-1-2-2. Yeah, definitely an interesting one to have, and that's just the first example that came to mind. There'll be other situations where that does come up. There's also some interesting trainer cards in here, which I'll probably just talk about those when we show the full image. I don't think we need to go through one by one, but for energy acceleration, there is the Blaziken EX I mentioned. Not sure why this one is popping up smaller than the other cards. That's a new one to me, but its ability on here makes it so once per turn, you can just accelerate an energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon in play. It doesn't have to go to the bench, doesn't have to be a specific type, so like you can easily pair this with something like Zoroark and just discard energy and use Blaziken as a way to get it out, or you can even pair this with the Mamoswine that wants fighting energy to get an attacks off. It's like, okay, cool, just get that fighting energy in the discard pile, Blaziken can get it out and get you going, so you're not manually attaching or reliant on supporters like Crispin or something like that to get it online. The other card coming out is Lilligant, so its ability Sunny Day makes it so your grass and fire Pokemon's attacks do 20 more damage. It doesn't say you can't stack this, so you could potentially have 4 of these on your bench, boosting up your attack damage by 80 for your grass and fire Pokemon. It's a nice way to fix up numbers, and it's even like probably going to be a meme deck, but definitely one worth experimenting with. You could run 4 of these with Budoos, right? And item lock your opponent while doing 90 damage to them. It's a little bit silly. You have Brute Bonnet in play, you poison your Budu, you check a Binding Mochi, you get another, what, 40 damage onto it that way, so you're doing 130? And item locking them for no energy? Is it going to be good? I genuinely don't know. It would be disruptive as heck though, so yeah, definitely one worth experimenting, but I feel like it's more so a card that you have 1 or 2 copies of this just to fix up some numbers for you. There will be situations where this comes up. Another card that can help you fix up numbers is Spike Energy. So it's going to count as a colorless energy. If you have that in your attack cost, you can easily be running this card. And when this Pokemon gets hit, it's going to be doing 20 damage back to the opponent. So kind of like a Rocky Helmet effect, but on an energy card. You can stack multiples of these two. So if you have just colorless energy in your attack cost, you could have multiples, and yeah, they hit you, potentially they get knocked out, right? If you have 2 of these and a Budu hits you, it takes 40 damage, gets KO'd. It's kind of funny. There is a Pokemon that pairs very nicely with this energy. I'm not going to say it's going to be like a meta deck though, so we might cover it a little bit later, but there's one that goes along with this. And here's the full list of the cards worth having though. The trainer cards I didn't mention, there is a new item card that lets you look at your prize cards. So all 6 of them, you're going to shuffle them back into your deck, and then you're going to take the top 6 cards of your deck, or you're going to take the amount of cards off the top of your deck that you had as prizes and just replace your prize cards. So if you're ever in a situation where you're very dependent on a key card and it happens to be prized, you may want to run this item card. Would probably just get slotted in as like a one-off copy in a deck though. Super Potion is also getting a reprint. It's going to heal 60 damage from one of your Pokemon, but makes you discard an energy from them. So if you're in situations or know that you have a bad matchup where it's like, this thing wants to do chip damage into me, I just need to be a little bit out of range, could be one worth considering. Like, it's a good answer to Dragapult, right? They want to put 6 damage counters on your bench. If they put them all on something so that it's like, I'm setting up my next KO to just boss do 200 into that. Now you can go Super Potion, remove those damage counters, could help fix that up for you, like Goldango as an example. Brock is also getting a new supporter card in this set. It's got a choose one effect, so you can either search your deck for 2 basic Pokemon, put them into your hand, or you can search your deck for 1 evolution Pokemon and put it into your hand. It's not limited by the amount of HP or rule box or non-rule box, so it could be a good way to just kind of help with your setup and consistency. And because it's on a supporter card, it's a way to kind of get around Budu. So if you're concerned about Budu making it so that you can't use Buddy Buddy Poffin, you could go into Brock. Being your supporter for turn though, it's not always going to be like the best choice, right? Because you could use something like Research and just straight draw into those basics or evolutions, but it is a nice card to kind of just have in your collection, just so it's like, are you scared of Budu? Do you need an answer to it and are dependent on getting your board set up? Maybe grab some Brock. There's also, I always forget this card's name. He's like the scalpery looking guy. Give me 2 seconds to bring it up. This is gonna bug me. Ruffian, that's his name. Ruffian. So you're going to discard a Pokemon tool and special energy from one of your opponent's Pokemon in play. It's definitely one of those things that's very, very situational, but again, if the meta kind of gets to a point where there is a specific tool and specific energy you want off your opponent's Pokemon, you may want to be running this. We do have other ways to remove special energy like Enhanced Hammer or Giacomo, and we do have ways to kind of disrupt tools but not fully remove them in Jamming Tower. Post-rotation, we are losing Lost Vacuum, which was a great way to remove a Stadium or a tool card, so this just kind of gives like a replacement for that, being like, well, I can remove the tool for you and I can also get rid of an energy. So like, it's a nice middle ground for that, but it is your supporter for turn, so do keep that in mind. Now we're going to get into the cards that could be good for these. I'm just going to jump into the full list. There is the Lycanroc, so it's got an ability that when you evolve up into it, you can attach 2 Spike Energy from your discard pile onto this Pokemon, so it's a great way to accelerate energy to it, and also make it so if your opponent attacks you, they're taking 40 damage. The attack cost on there being 3 colorless energy, so you just need to manually attach another energy to get going, and it's going to do 40 base damage, then 40 more damage for each damage counter on your opponent's Pokemon. So if you set this up with something like Dusclops to put 5 damage on one of your opponent's Pokemon, once this attack gets online, you're doing 240 off the get-go, so not too shabby. And then when they hit you, they take 4 damage counters. So if you take that first knockout, they go into a new attacker, they hit you, they take 4 damage counters, you go into another Lycanroc, you get the Spike Energy from the one that was just knocked out and then attached for turn, it's already set up damage counters, you kind of just keep that loop going. It's definitely an interesting concept, but feels a little too fringe to be meta, but you never know. Like, it could be one of those rogue decks that does go far. Definitely a fun deck to try. Gonna try it out on PTCGL. if you pull these, hang on to them, but I wouldn't say necessarily run out to the door to pick them up. Wailord is getting a new card in here. It's got the attack Hydro Pump. We've seen it before. It's going to scale up by damage based on the amount of water energy on it. So 4 colorless energy and scaling up by 50 for each water on there. So just to use the attack, you're doing 200 and then it can ramp up from there. For alternate formats like Gym Leader Challenge, this is going to be amazing, and potentially in Standard it could be good. Since 7 water energy on there, you're doing 350 damage. We do have Baxcalibur to kind of do the Rain Dance effect and get a bunch of energy onto this. And then when it gets knocked out, you just Superior Energy Retrieval, you get that back, you re-accelerate it out. The HP on there being 240 does make it pretty bulky. You could even attach the item card Luxurious Cape to give it another 100 HP, getting up to 340, basically making it just an EX Pokemon at that point. And with the attack and that much HP, it's not even a bad one. Like, that's pretty solid. So yeah, it's worth the risk. And then you can even push that health further with the next card on here, Ludicolo. It gives all of your Pokemon in play 40 additional health. So that 340 gets up to 380. You can't stack Ludicolos though, so that's kind of why I've got it at thin counts, but it could be an interesting card to kind of fix numbers so that opponents aren't taking KOs into you in a number of decks, or if you want to pair it with that Wailord, it could be a pretty funny rogue deck. Maractus is getting a new card in here too. It's got an ability that when it gets hit, it does, I want to say 6 damage counters back to your opponent, and the attack on there does 20 base damage and makes it so that your opponent's Pokemon can't retreat. So similar to Totodile, similar to Mawile. It's definitely an interesting one. You could kind of just be locking your opponent in the active, just bring up something that can't attack. Even if they get around, like they switch out, they go into something that can attack, they hit you, they take a bit of damage, then you try and just get that lock back into effect. There's also I always forget this name, Banette. So it's got an attack for 1 psychic energy that makes your opponent shuffle 3 cards in their hand back into their deck. So if you combo this with something like Xyrosix Machinations, which reduces your opponent's hand size down to 3 cards, then you shuffle those 3 cards back into their deck. Yeah, pretty interesting concept there. Just making them have a no card hand. A little bit disruptive, doesn't do any damage, so it would just be trying to slowly mill your opponent out in a couple of ways. I'm not a big control player. It does definitely seem like there's potential for a gimmick there, so it could be good, but I'm not going to talk too much to that. End's also getting another Pokemon in the Sigilif that's on here. The second attack on there being a Psychic double colorless. If you have 1 prize card remaining, you just take it. So if your opponent puts up a big wall that you can't get through, like none of your attackers are ready to go, you just go into Sigilif and just take that last prize. Or Zoroark copies the attack and just take that last prize, right? Because like you don't have a lot of things that can do massive damage outside of the Rage attack, but if your Zoroark's not damaged and they put up the 300 plus HP thing, you don't really have a way to get through that. It's just like, hey, I'm just going to take this prize when we're good. And Lily also having another Pokemon that could be good on here. The Ribombee, when you evolve up into it, your opponent reveals their hand, and then you put any basic Pokemon you find there onto the bench. So it's a great way to kind of scale up the damage output of your Clefairy. So if you just want to go all in on a Clefairy deck, could be a good card to pair with it. I don't know, I'm kind of mixed on it though, to be honest. And this could also be an interesting card to use as control, right? If you're finding basics in their hand that they don't want on the bench, like they've got a Squawkabilly in their hand and it's not the first turn of the game anymore, right? You're bringing that out, putting it onto the bench. You can gust it up for an easy 2 prize KO, or you can gust it up as a non-attacking Pokemon and try and lock it in the active with something like Maractus or Totodile. Could definitely see there being a concept. And next we're going to be talking about the alternate formats. So these aren't necessarily for everyone, but if you do enjoy single prize shenanigans like Gym Leader Challenge, which is all about just building a deck around 1 type of Pokemon and limited to just 1 card of each name, right? So like you can only have 1 Charmander, 1 Charmeleon, 1 Professor Research. It's an interesting concept. We'll be getting into that in just a moment. And then I do also have my own alternate format with tournaments hosted on Limitless every Friday night for Australian Central Time called Budget Build Battles, which it's similar to Gym Leader Challenge in that there's no rule boxes, so no Radiants, no A-Specs, no EXs, no Vs. But unlike Gym Leader Challenge, you aren't limited to just 1 type of Pokemon. So if you want to kind of like mix and match things, you can absolutely do that. So if your type doesn't have a draw engine, you have the option to put that in there. And you aren't limited to just 1 count of each card. You're allowed 2 copies of each card to kind of help out with consistency. And since it's based in the standard format, widens the amount of copies of cards you can play for Pokemon Search and Draw Power, with a slight exception for basic Pokemon that can evolve. You can have 1 extra copy of the basic for each stage of the evolution in your deck to help out with evolutionary consistency. and make it so that basics aren't just like super dominant in the format. So if you're interested in that, there should be a link popping up here that'll take you through to a video breaking down that format. But let's get into the cards for the alternate formats, starting off with Gym Leader Challenge. So there's the Lilligant, we talked about it already, just seems like a solid way to boost up your grass damage output. Wailord having that Hydro Pump attack seems solid for GLC, and there is a new Remoraid. It's got an attack doing 10 damage for each damage counter on it, so it could be an easy one to just slot in as a replacement for the current Remoraids, since you likely have Octillery in there as a draw engine already. N-Star Manitan seems like a great choice to run in GLC, using either Reversal Energy to get the second attack online, or just things like Magma Basin and Welder to help pay for that attack cost. The Magearna also seems like a great choice for steel decks if you want to go in kind of a tanky direction, and then you're just manually attaching energy to do a little bit of healing. For lightning types, there is a Joltik. It's 2 energy, you're doing 20 damage and removing all tools from your opponent's Pokemon in play, I believe is what it does. Give me 2 seconds. I put this one on the list and now I am drawing a blank talking about it. All right, the Joltik Crackling Short 30 damage, not 20, apologies. Before doing damage, discard all Pokemon tool cards from your opponent's active Pokemon. If you discarded a Pokemon tool card in this way, your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. So with lightning types in GLC, you can kind of play them as like control variants, so this seems like a good one to include in there. Paying for that attack cost, we've got things with Dynamotor. You can charge that up with the Flaffy or the Electrike to get it online really quickly and get going. Kilowattrel making an additional draw engine for lightning type decks, discarding a lightning energy from it. We just talked about Dynamotor though, so you Dynamotor to Kilowattrel, discard that energy, goes back in the bin. But you're getting a 6-card hand, seems pretty good. They do already have Electrode and Zebstrika though, so if this is strong enough to the additional cards that it gets you into, replace those, could definitely be worthwhile, but it is a little bit more situational than them. There is a Regirock on here that takes 30 less damage from attacks and does 120 damage for 3 fighting energy, so if you want to go for like a bulky fighting type deck, could definitely be an interesting one. All of Hop's Pokemon seem like great inclusions for colorless decks, and then these supporter cards we've talked about, Brock, just seems like an additional great way to search out your Pokemon. There's a new Iris card that you're going to discard a card from your hand, then draw until you have a 6-card hand, so similar to something like Serena, but just a little bit stronger. Serena having that secondary effect to gust up a V Pokemon, but them not being in Gym Leader Challenge, it just seems like this is just a stronger alternative to go into. And then Lavencia City and Postwick Gym being in there just seem like solid additions for a lot of decks. Now for the budget build battles format though, looking at higher counts than just one-off copies in here. So we've got the Lilligant at a 3-2 line. It could be great for fire decks and grass decks. We talked about that Buddy Lock potential for standard. Well, for budget build battles, being able to do 50 damage when you're just hitting into single prize Pokemon could be pretty solid. And if you have the Binding Mochi on there, getting it up to 90, yeah, it's pretty threatening. You're taking out pre-evolutions and you're two-shotting anything else. Darmanitan seems like a great inclusion for decks. There's not a lot of energy acceleration for fire types post-rotation, but being able to check a reversal energy on there to be able to take 2 KOs isn't too bad. Wailord also seems amazing for that format. The Luxurious Cape, the Ludicolo, and Max Caliber being able to just power this up and being a solid attacker and tank, yeah, it's pretty solid. There's a new Metagross releasing in this set that for, I believe it's 2 Psychic Energy. I'll just pull this one up. For 2 Psychic Energy, you're going to do 130 base damage. Then if you have Beldum and Matang on your bench, 150 more damage. So being able to run a 4-2-2 evolution line, you can rare candy up to a Metagross, you can manually evolve up to a Matang, then have 1 Beldum sitting on your bench, ready to evolve up and replace one of those when they get knocked out, and be able to do 280 damage. Yeah, not a bad shout. Definitely seems like a solid option to run. Regirock, we just talked about it. Same idea, he's just going to be a tanky big basic he can put into play. There's a new Tyranitar releasing that has an ability, making it so while it's in the active, your opponent just can't play item cards. So it's like Buddoo's attack, except as an ability. So he's just sat up there and like, yep, can't do anything. So instead of having an attack that does 10 in item locks, you have an attack that does 150 and mills the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck. So you're not only item locking them, you are also slowly just destroying their deck. Having only 2 copies of a card in your deck, it can be pretty disruptive if you're getting rid of their rare candies before they can use them. You're getting rid of their draw supporters or their key attackers. Maybe you discard their key attacker. They can't super rod it or night stretcher it back because Tyranitar's in the active. Yeah, it's pretty mean. Hop's Pokemon also seeming amazing for this format. There is a Noivern releasing with the ability Tuning Echo. if you and your opponents have the same amount of cards in your hands, you're going to ignore all energy in this Pokemon's attack cost. So that's pretty solid, and the attack on here doing 110 damage and confusing your opponent's active can be pretty disruptive. You're two-shotting into pretty much anything, and if they try and attack you, they may or may not actually land a hit. To make it so that you can consistently use that ability, you'd be playing cards like Iono and Judge just to kind of match your opponent's hand size. There's also a Kamala in here that seems kind of interesting for the format. It's got an attack Good Night Knocking, does 30 base damage, and puts both active Pokemon to sleep. During your next turn though, attacks used by this Pokemon do 100 more damage. So with the energy, therapeutic energy, that makes it so you just ignore status conditions, you have that attached to Kamala, it pays the attack cost and makes it so you don't go to sleep. You're just doing 30, then you're doing 130, and potentially making it so your opponent can't attack into you because they're just sat there asleep. They're flipping a coin, maybe they wake up, maybe they don't. It seems like an interesting one to kind of slot into decks that are already running therapeutic energy. I don't know if it would be a deck in and of itself, but like definitely an interesting attacker to experiment with. Hop does have another Pokemon that we didn't talk about for the standard format because honestly it feels pretty weak for standard, but for budget build battles does seem pretty solid. It's got the attack Shoot Through, doing 50 base damage, then 50 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, so you could potentially be taking out 2 Pokemon at a time or be setting up numbers. And the second attack on their Steel Wing does 150 base damage for 2 steel and a colorless Pokemon, or not colorless Pokemon, colorless energy. And during your opponent's next turn, this is going to take 60 less damage from attacks, so kind of making it just like a tanky guy. Got 170 HP, so it's already pretty bulky to deal with, and then that effect basically bringing it up to 230. Magearna being in here, we've talked about it before, same reasons are going to apply to it, and then all the trainer cards is kind of the same effects in there. Iris giving you some more draw options that you can be putting into decks, Ruffian just being a great disruptive card, Brock being a great way to get around Budu or just add more Pokemon search into your deck, Lavencia just being a great way to recover energy, Postwick to help boost up Hop's damage output, and then Spike Energy just seems like an interesting one to kind of fix up some numbers. So if you are just using colorless energy attackers, having a way to be able to not only power up your attack, but also do a little bit of extra damage into your opponent when they hit you, I think that's an interesting card to experiment with. Now, if you are wanting to see the full list of cards that we've talked about today, these are them. Now, do keep in mind, this is every single card that we talked about. You can break it down by the categories earlier in the video. Just go to the new decks. If there's any of those that catch your eye, just grab the ones that you're after. If you don't want to play Iono, don't get Iono's Pokemon. If you don't want to play Hops cards, just don't get those. Same with the like tech cards. You don't need to pick up every single one of them. There will be times where they are very relevant. There may not be, like they might not apply to every single deck that you're interested in playing. And the cards with potential that could be good, if you pull them from a pack, I'd say hang on to them. But if you want to pick up every single card that may be relevant while it's in rotation, this is the list of all of them. Cut it down to just what you're after though. Like this is my personal buy list that should be popping up on the screen now. Hang on, give me 2 seconds. Let's try that again. This is my personal buy list that should be popping up on the screen right now. So like, I'm not interested in playing Hops Pokemon really. The Dub Wall as a gust effect, I do think is really powerful. So I'm 100% going to be picking those up, and the Cramorant to fix up prize mapping in a number of decks. It's good. So I'm going to grab 2 of those because there will be situations where it's like, I'm reliant on a lot of 2 prize attackers. This is a single prize attacker I can slot in. It's also a way to deal with like things like EX walls like Mimikyu. So it's a good one to have. I do like it, the alternate formats, so Wailord, the Lilligans, I'm going to be grabbing those, and then just like energy shenanigans and toolbox decks I really enjoy. So Zoroark I'm going to pick up because I like toolbox decks. Iono's Belly Bolt, I really like the Rain Dance effect, so I'll be getting that, and Blaziken does make it so that pretty much any deck can function, right? It can accelerate out any energy type and just be slotted into a number of things. If you're just after the cards that have competitive potential though, so I do have things for alternate formats on here, if you just want the ones that has competitive potential over the lifetime of their release, this is going to be them. So these are cards that should impact the meta in some way, shape, or form during their entire duration of being in rotation. I hope you guys did find this video helpful though. If you want, just make sure to screenshot one of those lists. You can use it to help build your own buy list. Pick and choose the cards that you're after though. Everyone has a different budget. Everyone has a different play style and interest. So don't take this as gospel, right? It's not like, oh, Triple said buy every single one of these cards. No, I'm outright saying right now, you don't have to buy every single one of these cards. If you want anything that has potential, that's the list of them. If you're not interested in those cards though, skip them. You don't need them. Also, something to keep in mind, there will be pre-releases starting this weekend. Cards are going to release, they're going to be overpriced because there isn't a lot of supply in the market, right? Pre-release, a couple packs get broken open, but entire booster box and cases haven't. A week into release, after some more people have opened packs, after the really competitive people or the people with FOMO that have gone out and got the cards on release day, have kind of bought what they needed, a week or two after, more packs have opened, the prices will gradually reduce. So keep that in mind. If you're not in a rush to play any of these decks, don't go picking them up immediately. Give it a bit of time, wait for the prices to soften, wait for availability to increase. Something to keep in mind though, EXs at release, they're usually a little bit more expensive, whereas the uncommons and rares, a lot of places will kind of just do a flat price of like 50 cents to $1 for each. So if there's some rare cards in there, like the Duels, on release, I could see that being a 50 cent to $1 card, depending. So if you see a shop that just does flat prices, I'd say pick that up on release if you see it at a good price, because a week or two after, once people realize, hey, this card's actually pretty broken, that's likely going to go up a little bit. It's not going to be like ridiculously expensive, but it might go from being like $1 to like $4 or $5. So instead of buying a playset, you're now getting one copy for $5. So keep that in mind. Everyone's got different mentalities for it. That's how I usually approach it though, is like commons to rares, I'll buy on release if I can find them at a flat rate, and EXs, I usually hold off a week or two to see if the prices will soften. It's not financial advice though. Make your own decisions, guys. If you have any questions, ask me in the comments below. I do my best to respond to every single one. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, hitting that like button to let me know is always appreciated, and subscribe to keep up with the shenanigans. Till next time though, stay golden, you Goombas.